Hey guys, it's Tomatoda. Today I'm gonna show you how I made these cute Ditto pencil toppers. Note that there's no real function for these besides just being cute and maybe companionship while you stress out over doing your homework. This project does require quite a bit of materials that I know not everyone has, so I'm sorry about that. First, I'm gonna use this wooden pencil as my base. Make sure it's actually a regular sized pencil. When I first experimented, I used this yellow pencil here as my base, and I didn't know that it was actually skinnier than normal because, as you can see, my experimental topper doesn't fit on any of my other pencils. Also, make sure that your base pencil is round and not dimensional because that will ensure that your topper will fit on any shaped pencil as long as it's the right diameter. Now, taking a small sheet of parchment paper, wrap it around the pencil, making sure that the edges align and cut off the excess. This is going to prevent the clay from sticking to the pencil. Make sure it's tightly wrapped and then use washi tape to secure it at the bottom. Set that aside and prepare a sheet of polymer clay and straighten out the edges. This is actually scrap clay, but the color turned out pretty nice when I mixed it. Anyways, I pulled it through my Posca machine on setting number 4, which probably means nothing to you because each machine has different setting sizes, so let me instead use a ruler to kind of show you how thick the sheet is. I want the cap portion of the topper to be ½ inch long, so I'm making a mark with a pencil just as a guide. And since I didn't tape the top part, I'm going to first wrap the clay over that open flap area to secure the tightness, and then cut off the excess. This is a tiny bit over the ½ inch pencil mark because I wanted to give myself a little room in case I made a mistake. Now, when sealing up the ends, make sure that there's no air trapped inside as much as possible. And then soften, blend, and straighten everything out. Once the shape is done, poke a hole at the top of the cap and bake it in the oven for only 10 minutes. Once that 10 minutes is done, it should be stiff enough for you to take everything apart. Using this flat head pin that's used for beads, poke a hole through the top so that it'll be easy to poke it through the bottom. Here, I stick my pencil back in just to keep the head pin in place. Cut off the excess and bend it into this thing. Taking some polymer clay that's about the width of the cap, shape it into a ditto. I like to use a stick tool to first separate the arms from the head and the body, and then define and soften the shape with my fingers. Once the shape kind of looks like the Snapchat ghost, make an indent in the middle of the head and it'll start looking more like a ditto. Here, I'm just flattening and curving out the bottom so that it fits the rounded part of the cap. Pre-poke a hole at the bottom so that the shape doesn't distort too much when it's attached to the cap. I'm adding liquid clay here, not for the purpose of adhesion, but to seal in the gap in between the ditto and the cap. Whoa, rhyming here. Anyways, I'm sealing in the gap so that the mold will turn out better. Now it's time to add the details of Ditto's face. These indents are gonna help me paint his face more easily and consistently, but it also means that I'm stuck with just one expression. If you want to paint Ditto with more than one face, I suggest you to skip this part. After the face is done, remove the pencil and fully bake the topper. This is what my model looks like so far, and now I'm gonna sand the bottom with this fine grit sandpaper. I'm just gonna rub the bottom in a circular motion until the edges seem nice and evened out. Begin cleaning the clay with a Q-tip dipped in acetone. The goal isn't to remove dust, but to remove textures like fingerprints. Lightly clean the inside as well, and our model is finished. It's time to cast the mold. To create a barrier for our mold, I'm using this small plastic cup and cutting it through here. Try to make it as even as possible, even though it's pretty hard if you can't tell. Save this bottom part for later. With the top part, cut off this portion if your cup has it. Here, I'm figuring out how small I can make the barrier without it touching the model. You don't want it too thick or it might be difficult to push out the topper, but you don't want it too thin that it rips apart. Now that I've found a good size, I'm gonna use packaging tape because I still don't have regular tape for some reason, and just seal it off on the outside. Then even out the top with scissors. Taking some more packaging tape, stick the model on there and make sure that the bottom is pressed on really well. Then stick the barrier, making sure that the topper is centered in the middle as much as possible. Using a glue gun, seal off the bottom. This will make sure that the silicone mold mixture won't leak through. I like to do 2 layers. Now it's time to work on our clear silicone mix. Actually, in reality, it's transparent, it's not really clear. I need about 10 milliliters total. The brand of silicone I'm using is called Dragon Skin 20, and I'm going to pour 5 milliliters of part A. Sorry about the camera issues, I wanted to film from a better angle, but it was actually really difficult. Anyways, after that, I add 5 milliliters of part B, and I fucking spilled it on my paper backdrop. Mix everything together thoroughly, and yes, the silicone is bubbly, but it actually doesn't affect the mold, so don't worry, unless you did something wrong. Pour it in slowly. Give it time to settle so you don't have gigantic air bubbles stuck inside. Usually, the big bubbles do float to the top and pop, but I think it's better to go slow and steady anyways. Plus, I find this part to be pretty therapeutic. I like to fill up my molds about 5 millimeters above the top of the model, because like I said before, if it's too thick, pushing the topper through becomes kind of difficult, but if it's too thin, it might just rip. With the leftover silicone, I'm gonna rub it into the shit that I accidentally spilled so that when it cures, I can just lift everything off cleanly. It works beautifully on glass surfaces, which is what I usually work on, but since this is paper, not so great. After it's cured, cut around the tape so it doesn't get in the way. Now flip it over, cause we need to cut a hole along the inside. You want to get as close to the edge as possible without chipping off any of the polymer clay. Then, using the glue gun again, make a barrier to contain the next pour of silicone. This time, I'm making 5 milliliters total because that's the lowest amount I can make with this measuring cup. Slowly and carefully drip it into the hole and spread it out to create a lid. After another 4 hours, the mold is completely cured and it's time to remove everything. Here, I'm just removing some of the excess silicone from the mold. When it's put together, it looks great. So this is the same pigment I used for my experimental topper, but because I had so much left over from the first time, I saved it to reuse it. It's made up of a bit of UV resin and only 1 drop of white alcohol ink and 1 drop of purple alcohol ink. The reason why I couldn't pour this mixture directly into the mold is because it's very opaque, which means that the UV light won't be able to penetrate through, which in turn means that the resin cannot fully cure. The outsides will cure, but the insides will still be liquid, and there's always potential that it'll leak in the future. So I diluted the pigment mixture in more UV resin. Add just 1 toothpick drop at a time and make sure that it's still transparent because that will ensure that the UV light can penetrate through and cure the resin inside and out. After that, I tried to pour it into my mold, but I made some oopsies. When the Ditto part is filled, cure it in the UV lamp for a minute. While it's curing, mix your glitter mixture and then pour it in after. I like to fill up the cap portion about halfway. I'm gonna say it's better to have more than less. And then slowly push in the cap. The UV resin that overflows will create like a suction feeling, I guess. Make sure the cap is centered well and then cure it for the full time. When you remove it from the mold, it should pop out fairly easily. I'm squishing it here to make sure that the resin inside isn't still liquidy and that it's actually fully cured. Don't hesitate to try out different combinations and experiment with like different glitters and pigments and stuff like that. If your piece has hardened but it still seems a bit sticky or tacky, shove it back into the lamp with or without the mold. Here's what they look like so far. These two look fine in the front, but they look butt naked in the back. There are some rough edges here where I ripped off the overflow resin, so I'm lightly sanding it off. Now, using more acetone on a Q-tip, I'm removing any oils or dirt on the topper. I'm only using my bare fingers to touch the parts that haven't been cleaned yet. After it's squeaky clean, use Posca paint pens or acrylic paint to add in the facial details. Now here, for aesthetic reasons for the video, I thought it would be a great idea to place the topper on the silicone thing and stand it in the UV lamp like this to cure, but it was actually not a good idea because the thing just flopped around and it was difficult to brush on the UV resin neatly. So after I cured the first coat, I replaced it with a pencil. And because I can't stand a pencil up in the UV lamp, I laid it down on this pencil rest. It's gonna make it easier to turn the pencil around once in a while so that every part of the topper gets enough UV light. Going in for my second coat, I recommend doing 2 thin coats with a flat paintbrush rather than 1 thick coat. Quickly and lightly pop all the small bubbles with the lighter and cure it in the UV lamp for the full time required. Seeing my creations go from matted to glossy is one of my favorite things. I put hollow flakes in this Ditto body, and this guy here has purple face with pink cheeks. Ta-da! Your Ditto companions have been completed! The toppers look so cute! Thank you guys for watching, hope you are doing well, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye!